Ladies and gentlemen, Psalms 59 says, "Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Defend me from them that rise up against me. Deliver me from the workers of iniquity, and save me from bloody men. Because they lie in wait for my soul. The mighty are gathered against me. Not for my transgression, not for my sin, O Lord. They run and prepare themselves without my fault. Awake to help me, and behold this." Justice. We're talking Justice League. And it's just an awesome thing for me to do these videos for you guys. It takes immense amounts of time to do these videos, but I'm always happy to do them for you. Let's talk Justice League. So, to give you some sort of setting for Justice League, you need to understand the number 3. The number 3 is a very important number when we're talking about this movie, which is part of a trilogy. And Zack Snyder brilliantly does this over and over again. The 3 principal characters, the trinity that leads the Justice League, is Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. And it's not surprising, therefore, that Zack Snyder takes a special interest in these 3 characters, and he takes time to develop them. And that happens over 3 films. Each of them take part in 3 different films. And each film, whether it's cameo or not, shows you one aspect of these characters. The thing I love about the DCEU and about Zack Snyder is he's constantly giving you glimpses of the characters. He's constantly developing the characters. They're not the same character you saw in the film before. And with the evolution of these characters, because they're going on a hero's journey, it makes for a much more effective and, I believe, informative story. Not just a story that is to be taken as entertainment and then left alone, but a story that you could actually embrace in your journey in life. And it has strengthened me some as well as an individual. So let's talk about Superman. The first time we see him is in Man of Steel. And we don't see Superman until the latter end of Man of Steel. Think about what I'm saying. So that it's only towards the end of the movie that we actually know that Clark, aka Kal-El, he grows into Superman. And the world calls him Superman for the first time. That is very interesting, and we will come back to that in a minute. But we see Superman in Man of Steel. And in Man of Steel, I'm not going to go deeply into the character. I'm just going to say that Superman has to make a choice. He has to make a choice if he's going to stand proud in front of the earth, and he's going to represent them and the ideals, the best ideals of humanity, as well as share in his Kryptonian heritage by embracing the values of hope that his Kryptonian family, the House of El, have hold near and dear to them. And I could go much deeper into that, but I will leave it at that. That was the challenge in Man of Steel. In Batman v Superman, it's a very interesting story. And this time the tables are turned. And now we are looking at man being challenged to embrace this alien, this Kryptonian, who has immense powers and abilities. And they have to decide, mankind, through the eyes of Batman, through the eyes of the government of the country, through the eyes of the citizens, if they will unanimously rally behind him because they see the hope that he brings as well as the merits of him being present and sharing the world with them. It's a very informative story, and it's all based on Superman. There's a lot to Superman in BVS, and there's a lot to Superman in Man of Steel, but I'm not going to be talking about Superman right now. We're just talking about the Trinity and the fact that 3 films were used to develop on the Trinity. I haven't tried to go into detail with this, and I won't, okay? Now, the final chapter is a very interesting one. And the final chapter, because this trilogy is really based and centered, the heart of this trilogy is Superman. And so the final chapter speaks to the fact that now the world has lost Superman. And now we have to deal with a world which must reconcile without Superman, without that symbol of hope. Did they fully come to accept him? Yes, they did in BVS. But by that time, he was gone. And now a world without Superman left people fearful and hateful. And we saw that world. However, Superman had made an impact on Batman, and because of that, we have the birth of the Justice League. Like I said, Dawn of Justice, and we saw Dawn of Justice in BVS with Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman side by side, fighting to defend the helpless, the powerless. This is what Wonder Woman is all about. And also to prosecute the wrongdoer. That's justice. That was the birth of it. That was the prequel to the Justice League. It wasn't the Justice League, but it was the prequel to it. And that's why it was called Dawn of Justice. In the Justice League movie, we see those attributes on display even more. But this time, Batman leads it, right? Now, it's important to understand Superman again comes back in Justice League, the last of the trilogy, at the end of the movie as well. Superman presents himself at the end of the movie. He's brought to life, but then we see Superman. We see Superman, not Clark Kent, not Kal-El. We see Superman at the end of the movie as well. Okay? I love the symmetry that Zack Snyder brings. So you see Superman at the end of Man of Steel, and we see Superman at the end of Justice League. And it's very important that Superman came back at the end of Justice League, because Superman, basically, he embodies the characteristics of justice and truth. That's what he's all about, truth and justice. So it was not surprising that Superman comes back at the end of the film, and this is Superman, okay? You know, this was a growing Superman, okay? Still incredibly powerful, but more importantly, still having some issues with how to handle things, because he's not very experienced. The second Superman, he's a lot more experienced. He's trying to handle situations, but he has never come upon a situation where the symbol that he represents had been challenged that much. Okay? And finally, we meet the Superman, who he's basically the embodiment of hope, because he has come back. And that's almost impossible to happen. So that now he is more powerful than ever, and there's really nothing he can ever face again that really will be a challenge to him like he has gone through. He has gone through everything. He's gone through, when he was a child, he went through the fact that he was different, that people were afraid of him, that he was rejected. He went through, as an adult, trying to save a situation, things getting a little bit worse, even though he did save the situation. Goes through the fact now, as a seasoned superhero, seasoned adult in the public eye, he's been berated. He's gone through events and baptized by events where he's tried to do well and worse has happened, and he wonders if there's a point to it, and he's all gone through that baptism of losing hope, gaining it back, as well as he's gone through the baptism of dying. Okay? And he has been rebirthed. So it's just everything that you could possibly have in a hero's journey, Superman has embodied that. And so the Superman that we now see is much more mature, he's much more powerful, and he actually can now somewhat laugh in the face sometimes of some very serious things that has happened to him. He can actually laugh and make a joke about it, be light about it. So this is the Superman that we have gotten. And the evolution of Superman has been epic. Zack Snyder could not have done it better. Even when I look at the cinematography of all three films, as much as I know that Justice League is not the most refined cinematography, in the sense that you can feel that it's unfinished. In fact, I think there was a critic, a very good critic, who really loves Zack Snyder's films and stuff, and he said, it was a bit unpolished. And we all agree, we can all universally agree that the movie wasn't fully polished. It was polished, don't get me wrong, but there were points in the movie which, didn't take us out the movie, those of us who liked it. Those of us who didn't like it, or have hate towards it, even though they enjoyed it, those people will highlight those things. Understandable, but those things are easily fixed. All right, they're very easily fixed. But this movie, its tone, its tenor, they add a lot more color, but its tone and its tenor and the storytelling is definitely Zack Snyder. Okay, so That's why when I haven't watched all three movies together as yet, but Superman's growth and development as a character was pivotal. I think he got the most coverage. All three movies, he's the most covered character of all of the Justice League members. And it serves to say Zack Snyder really does love Superman. I know that people looking back in time, in history, and watching this trilogy, they will absolutely love it. It seems apparently that Zack Snyder's films, though controversial at the time they are released, people love them more and more with time. It's like they get better and better with wine because of so much love and dedication he puts into his films. And of course, I would love to see a director's cut of this. I would love to. But quite frankly, I realize that this is Zack Snyder's work. I can feel it. I can feel it very heavily. Of course, don't get me wrong. I would love to see a director's cut. I would love it. And we will push for that in the future, but not right now because, let me put it to you this way. I would love to see it. I understand the constraints Warner Brothers will have in terms of money to be able to put that out, but it would be a wonderful thing for Warner Brothers to do that. I know it's just going to become more and more of an appetite for people to see a director's cut of this film. Now, the further away Warner Brothers goes from this production date, to do that, I think the more there will be a demand. But the problem is, the more it's going to be difficult to really complete the project. So I hope that somehow, some way, I don't know how, because it's almost an impossibility right now. If this movie had done well at the box office, very well that is, it broke even, and that's not, I wouldn't call that well at all for a movie like this. But if it did absolutely well at the box office, if it crossed $1 billion, this would not be an issue. Okay, this would have never have been an issue. But let's just keep it moving. So the next character I want to talk about is Batman. Oh my God. Forget best live action. The best action performance ever done, whether it's in animation or it's in live action, that I have ever seen, I just went back and watched it, is the scene where Batman comes to save Martha Kent. I take this particular shot of Batman because this, to me, is what Batman is in the eyes of criminals. That's Batman. There's no other way to describe Batman. I mean, you can't have a guy dressing up in a bat suit. There's no way a guy dressing up in a bat suit scares criminals unless his intensity and his intent is just that, to scare them. He's a horror to criminals. He's a horror to civilians too, but he doesn't go after civilians, so he's a horror to those who break the law. I mean, he is the absolute terror. That's what I get from this Batman. I mean, BVS introduced a Batman, and of course Zack Snyder, with the shading and the lighting and everything that he did, even made him more creepy. I mean, this is a Batman. If you're a criminal, you don't want to run across this Batman. I mean, BVS Batman is, I don't think it gets better than that. I mean, BVS's Batman is the ultimate Batman. I'm sorry, Kevin Conroy's, he's done a lot of work. He's done exhaustive amount of work. But after I reflect on this Batman, I don't think there's a better Batman than this Batman, live or animated. I think you get a better Batman in the comics, because the comics, I mean, you can't beat literature, okay? But in terms of live action, or even in terms of comics, this Batman is the ultimate Batman. I've seen Ben Affleck now 3 times, okay? We've seen Batman in BVS. I mean, look at this Batman. Look at this Batman. I mean, he looks like he's on steroids or something. I mean, look at this guy. He's creepy. He looks really, really strong. I mean, look at this Batman. I mean, my God. So, this Batman is, to me, the ultimate Batman I've ever seen. I'm sorry, Michael Keaton. I loved your Batman. I mean, every time I look at Michael Keaton's Batman, I love it. This Batman will beat the shit out of Michael Keaton's Batman. I mean, this Batman is on another level, okay? I mean, Zack Snyder, look at the bodysuit. Look how ripped this Batman is. I mean, and then the color and the shading and the toning and just the way how Zack Snyder did it. It was so gritty and everything. And, you know, you could not tell where CGI was for the most part in BVS. I mean, the thing just felt real, you know, and Man of Steel. And, oh my gosh. So anyway, Batman was introduced in BVS, all right? And you got a lot of his story. You got a lot of background about him. This was not the same Batman that we are accustomed to. This is an older Batman. He's been experienced. He's a bruiser. He's a grinder. I mean, Batman goes bat crazy. Like, bat crazy really is a real word now. He goes bat crazy in that place when he's saving Martha Kent. I mean, you guys need to go watch that fight scene again. I just went back and watched it, and I was like, Batman was lit. I mean, Batman was taking on everybody, and I mean, he was not playing. I mean, the intensity of that scene alone is just like, forget a Batman movie, forget comic book movies, action period. I mean, the intensity of that action scene, I've never seen nothing like it. And then Batman's done already crazy. And he's filled with rage. So the rage, the crazy, the bruiser Batman, he's not killing people, but he's definitely breaking bones. I mean, oh my God, I've never seen that before. I mean, if you want to know anything, I mean, I don't know how to describe this. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but that is the best action scene I have seen in a long time in terms of action movies. That was not Hollywood, man. That was visceral. Like, you felt this guy, like you could feel it coming off the television screen. You're raying and stuff, but you're thinking, man, if I was a criminal, oh my God, I'd be dead. I'd get a heart attack right there and then, because I can't stand up against this dude. This dude is he's a killer. Okay, I mean, he doesn't kill people, but I mean, he's a killer in that scene. Oh my God. So, yes, Batman. I don't want to go up against that Batman. I think you get chills. I think he's like that urban legend, that horror urban legend. He's like a urban vampire. I can understand why people would think he's a vampire, or he drinks people's blood, or he kill people, because good God, Batman. I mean, and he came up through the floor, and oh my God, Arkham Knight, and I mean, okay, so yeah, Zack Snyder blew our minds with that Batman. I saw it in the trailer. Up to now, I can't get over that Batman. Anyways, this Batman was first introduced to us. And the first time we were introduced, it was like a horror movie. I mean, you know, you see him hanging on the ceiling like a bat. Dude, the police is shooting at him, which he's supposed to do. I mean, but the police is shooting at him out of fear. He almost snaps the other policeman's head off. And then you see Batman brand this dude, and he beat the shit out of him. I mean, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, oh my God. That was the best Batman I've ever seen. I don't know about you guys. I hear people talk about Christopher Nolan's Batman and Batman trilogy, and look. Listen, guys. Forget live action Batman. The only Batman that beats this Batman is the Batman in the comics. Okay, and only because of sheer numbers. Okay, Ben Affleck's Batman with his stunt double is the most impressive Batman I've ever seen. And the thing about Batman is he goes through an arc. He actually has a personality. He's not one-dimensional like how they have them portrayed in the animated series, or he's even portrayed in past Batman movies. It's not just relentlessness for Batman. You know, we see in this one movie, BVS, we see Batman go from tired, frustrated, hateful, fearful, trying to take out his fears and his frustration and his hate on Superman, to becoming a Batman who was shocked at what he had become, and then a Batman that's mystified when he sees Wonder Woman. You know, it's just like he has a personality. Like, Batman actually has a personality now. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God, Zack Snyder's so crazy. Like, I can't tell you how much Zack explores the character, the psychology of Batman. Nobody else has done that. And like, people don't get that Batman was, first of all, I don't think most people realize that Batman, I mean, yes, with Michael Keaton's Batman, we realized Batman was crazy, right? But the thing about it is, Batman's superhero status is like Zorro's superhero status, like Robin Hood's superhero status. He's not really a superhero. Like I try to explain to people, Batman is not a superhero. He's not really a superhero, if you think about it. Not just because he doesn't have superpowers, but also Batman flirts with that fine line, very fine line, between being a hero and an anti-hero. In fact, sometimes he crosses the line and he's an anti-hero. He's actually more criminal than he is. And the beautiful thing about it is, Zack is able to show us this. Like every single Zack Snyder movie we've seen, from Man of Steel, we've learned new things about Superman. Because Zack would emphasize, he's not really from this world. He's an alien. And it shows. And even when he tries to suppress and hide it, the people around him realize he's not like them. So when Zod comes up on the scene and really exposes his files, he's forced to have to step out of the shadows. People don't realize that Superman was in the shadows. Just like with the Justice League, there's a lot of symmetry going on here. And Man of Steel makes Superman step out of the shadows. No other Superman movie has done that. Now, kudos to Superman Returns, because what was beautiful about Superman Returns is Superman Returns, Superman was Superman all along. And he's coming back. And they deal with the complexities of relationships with people because he is returned. And I find that very interesting as well. And he's an experienced Superman, like a really experienced Superman, right? Which a lot of people enjoyed, and to this day, Superman Returns, the audience doesn't. I mean, it still gets a bad panning by the audience, but there are merits in Superman. Bryan Singer's Superman Returns has merits in it. I don't particularly like it, but I gotta acknowledge the value in it, right? When you're talking about Superman, for the first time, we see an inexperienced Superman. We have never seen that before. We've never seen an experienced Batman that's been a Batman for so long. And where does this lead? And I think the enigma of these characters is what Zack played with. It wasn't, people call it deconstruction of your heroes. I understand what they really are trying to say, but I don't think that's what Zack was doing with these two heroes, Superman and Batman. I don't think he was deconstructing them. What I think he was doing was he was dealing with a certain aspect of them that we haven't dealt with before. See, even in Superman 1978, where we see the flashback scenes of Clark, there's a lot of missing information in there when he's growing up that Man of Steel was able to fill in. It's almost a Christopher Nolan sort of approach to things that Zack is doing. Like with Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan explores an area of Batman's existence nobody really talked about. Of course, it's David Goyer behind that, but still Nolan's idea. And I thought it was very engaging, and I think that's the brilliance of what Christopher Nolan did with Batman Begins. And some people will say Batman Begins is actually a better movie than The Dark Knight. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me, and it's okay. But the merits in Batman Begins, it fills in that gap. How did Batman become Batman? That's what Batman Begins gives you. And only the comic books had given you that to this point. So I think that's where, I think if you want to talk about Nolan's best work in the Dark Knight trilogy, I think it's Batman Begins. It's the best of it because it fills in that gap and explains to you how Batman becomes Batman. I think there's a lot of merit in that. I'm not saying it's accurate, but I'm just saying there's a lot of merit in it. And there's a lot of leeway for Nolan to do that. I thought The Dark Knight was fantastic because of Heath Ledger. Good sterling performance by the guy who played Harvey Dent. I'm talking acting-wise. Acting-wise, it was pretty good. But it's not, what really made me enjoy that movie, and I did enjoy it, unlike every other Christopher Nolan film, including Batman Begins, I didn't enjoy Batman Begins. It's just way too long. I got the merits in it, but it's just way too long for me. Like, Nolan's films, people praise Hans Zimmer for Nolan's films, and I'm like, I don't get it, But nonetheless, that's the merits in Batman Begins. We got a Man of Steel, and I love that it was called Man of Steel. It wasn't called Superman. And the cool thing about it was Man of Steel again filled in that gap that we've never covered before of Superman growing up. And they did it in a very eloquent, beautiful way. And I can understand why people say Man of Steel is a masterpiece. I get it now. And over time, people are going to just praise that film even more. Batman v Superman, whether it's the ultimate cut or the theatrical cut, I don't care, gives us a Batman we have never seen before. And what's beautiful about that is we're talking about Batman, a seasoned Batman that's been around for many, many, many years. And he's had a lot of losses. And I love that they don't just go with a Batman that we've known for a long time. They go from his origins. And they give you what makes him tick. And I think those are two very important things to remember when you're talking about these movies, because basically what is cool about Batman and what's cool about Superman is the psychology of them. And it's not so much the action scenes. I mean, it's wonderful to see the action scenes, but I think it's the psychology of these characters. And why the psychology is important and relevant to you and I is because if you think about it, these characters, for them to be something that you could live through and live on some of what they represent, they must be relatable to us. It's the humanity of them that's important. Now, I've been watching Trevor Noah, who is a comedian, and Trevor, he goes through a number of different things which he talks about, which is comedy, and that comedy can be used to sort of help you through very difficult situations. And I understand what Marvel is striving for, but you have to understand comedy in and of itself and laughing is not necessarily the thing that frees people. I believe the thing that frees people with comedy is being able to say tough things to people in a manner that's somewhat amusing to them. Take for instance Trevor Noah. He says some very serious things and some very unpalatable things at times, but he's able to do so because he looks at and he encapsulates and he embodies it in humor. And the humor is one in which makes you kind of think and be like, that's true. I just never thought about that. And I think that kind of humor goes a long way in helping people reflect. I believe that situational humor is somewhat the same. Without actually saying anything, people seeing characters in certain situations find it funny because they've never seen them in those situations before. And I simply believe that's the same thing with Batman. When Batman looked at Superman and said, "She's with you," and he's got this creepy voice, "She's with you," and he's like, Superman said, "She's with you," and he says, "I thought she's with you," and he looks at her. Some people didn't like that joke. They said they thought it was lame or whatever. For me, it was hilarious. And the reason being that we see a bewildered, bemused Batman. We've never seen that. Never seen that on the big screen. And these are things that people just, because they're new to them, and maybe the comedy fell flat for them, or because they hate the movie or whatever, so that the humor wasn't funny to them. Whatever reason it is, to me, those situations are just unique. You never see Batman puzzled, like really perplexed, like he's thrown for a loop. You never really see that with Batman. And so these unique situations, I thought, in BVS make Batman what I think, I spent inexhaustible time talking about Batman here, make Batman unique. And so it's not surprising when we see Batman show up in Suicide Squad, which is the second film we see Batman in. This time, Batman is not shooting down criminals indiscriminately. He's not going to shoot you in the head sometimes or beat you or brand you. He's not that excessive. He's not that brutal. This is, of course, before Bruce Wayne encounters Superman and the destruction that happens to his enterprise, and that snaps him. So you see Batman here, and he with Deadshot for instance, and he apprehends him, ties him up, and then leaves him. And of course, we've seen Batman tie up people and leave them a number of times. And we've seen him also pursuing the Joker, Harley Quinn, as we see here in Suicide Squad. And Batman here again, he apprehends another criminal, ties him up, and leaves him as usual. And that is, again, consistency and continuity in Justice League. But the interesting thing about Batman is his evolution doesn't stop. So in Justice League, we continue off with the Batman that we know from Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. I heard a lot of people say, man, we want that broken, bruised Bruce Wayne that we saw in Batman v Superman. I know you fell in love with that, but quite frankly, we already knew by the end of Batman v Superman that Bruce Wayne had changed. And he was not going to be that killer Batman that you saw where he's, kind of running through people and some people get killed in the process. He wasn't going to be that Batman anymore. So we saw Bruce Wayne, and when we see him, he's again looking like that Batman that we know, right? And then we go into him modifying and becoming otherwise. But the beautiful thing of Bruce Wayne here, the first Batman we saw in BVS, he was a Batman filled with fear. He was overpowered by hatred, revenge, and he had become excessively brutal. The Batman we saw in Suicide Squad, we realized was more apprehending, chasing you down, more the Batman we knew, Justice. When we come to the Batman in Justice League, we get an evolution of a Batman now who, all the Batmans before, he was working by himself. This is a Batman working with others. Now, we'd seen Batman work with others on the live screen, the big screen, before. We saw it in the 1968 film Batman, right? 1966, sorry. We saw him also work with others in Batman and Robin and Batman Forever. So this was not a new concept. But what is interesting is seeing him begin to work with others again. I think we had seen Batman begin to work with others as well in Batman Forever, but but for the first time. But this time we're seeing him work with others again. This time Batman has lost a lot, and so he likes to work by himself. But in this case, he needs to work with others. And it's interesting how he reveals himself, how the urgency of the situation. We also see that the hope drives him to do this. But he's not really an inspirational figure. That the grumpy, grouchy, hard-nosed, hard-knocks kind of Batman that's kind of crass, and he has a heart, but he's really not very human. He's learning his humanity all over again. We see that Batman is not as inspirational to the entire team as, say, a Superman, and he realizes this. And so we see him evolve, and we see him now, his humanity. We see more of the humanity of Batman. We've never seen that before on the big screen. We've never seen We've seen one-dimensional Batmans. We've seen Batman that's been relentless. Batman will come after you, get you, he'll nab you, he has to escape from criminals or whatever. He's always determined, that kind of one-dimensional Batman. This Batman, and so even more, the Bruce Wayne we see, he acknowledges his shortcomings. He acknowledges he can't do it alone. He acknowledges he needs help. He acknowledges he can't go on forever. He acknowledges. You hear him speak about his weaknesses. You hear him say something definitely is bleeding. This is a Batman, that's talking about, I can barely do it now. He's, of course, an older Batman, but the point is, we see a Batman who's becoming more human. We've never seen this Batman before. We've seen a Batman in awe. We've seen a Batman in wonder at the end of BVS. We've seen a Batman who realizes he fails Clark Kent. I mean, he's determined to do it, to succeed at at not failing Superman and Clark in death. But you can see also the human aspects of him, and that's something we've never seen before. And I'm talking about Batman. Batman, this relentless beast, this relentless guy who always catches his criminal. Now we're seeing something a little different. He's still the detective. He's still on the trail, but he's a different Batman. And that's the nice thing about these characters. Now, this is superficial. I'm talking to you guys. I haven't even gone into depth about these three characters, but each time we see them, we see another dimension to them. We're introduced to Wonder Woman very briefly. Like Superman, she ends up really presenting herself at the end of the movie. Okay? Now, the difference between Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman is Batman, we're introduced to him very early. We're introduced to Batman in the Batsuit very early in Batman v Superman. No matter which edition you talk about, we see Batman. We learn about him. It's about fear. He's a guy that wants to scare the criminals shitless. That's what he does. Okay. Wonder Woman presents herself at the very end of the movie. That is when we first see Wonder Woman. Before that, we've seen Diana Prince. Very much like Superman, she presents herself at the end of the movie. Now, what's interesting about Diana is that when she has her own film, she is presented to the world and she appears in the second half of the movie. So she's not necessarily at the end of the movie. She's closer to the end of the movie, but there's still a lot more journey for her. But she's presented to the world somewhere a little bit after the halfway point. So maybe between the halfway point and 2/3 of the movie, Wonder Woman appears on the scene. Okay? And so she appears to the world in the second half of Wonder Woman. All right? That's a little bit different to Superman. And that's in her own movie. And when we finally see Wonder Woman in Justice League, she appears at the very beginning of Justice League. She's one of the first figures we see in Justice League. Okay? Which is, again, very, very interesting. So, let's talk about Wonder Woman and her journey. The first thing, when we first see Wonder Woman, very, very quickly, the story in Justice League shows us that Wonder Woman, she has not been presenting herself to the world. She's not a beacon like Superman. She's not come out of the shadows. Of course, I must mention that Batman's always in the shadows. Okay, he's never showed himself to the world. Okay, he's this legend because he's always in the shadows. Wonder Woman, she's in the shadows too in BVS, and then she comes out of the shadows because Bruce Wayne, who is the alter ego of Batman, Bruce Wayne, well, it's really Batman. Batman finds her and realizes who she is. Now, here's the interesting thing about the whole thing. If you really think about the psychology of it, why would Wonder Woman give Bruce Wayne this drive to decrypt? Okay, she didn't succeed at decrypting the drive. She gives him back his drive to decrypt. Was she giving him back? I'm just saying, this is a guess. This is a guess now. Was she giving it back so he would decrypt it so he could find out that she was Wonder Woman? Is she subliminally doing that? Okay, I must be reading too much into that, but I'm just saying. It's still interesting that at the end of the day, he, by letting her know who she is, and realizing, or at least finding out who she is in part, and showing it to her, and showing her the other metahumans, he kind of pushes her to come out of the shadows. And he constantly does that throughout the other movies. But let's start with her story. So when we see Wonder Woman, she's at the end of BVS. She's halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through Wonder Woman we see her. And then we see her at the end, at the beginning of Justice League. She's there from the jump. Here's the interesting thing about her. Her character in BVS comes out of the shadows and appears to the world. And one of the most spectacular entrances ever in the history of cinema. I mean, Batman's entrance in BVS was good. Superman's entrance in Man of Steel was great. But Wonder Woman's entrance in Batman v Superman was, I mean, you couldn't get it better than that, okay? When she came out in Batman v Superman as Wonder Woman, we saw her as the warrior. She was a defender. We realized that she was the greatest warrior of all of them. She could outfight everybody. She was taking on Doomsday. Basically, she was taking on Doomsday. Superman was getting his ass kicked. Even though he was beating Doomsday at first, Now Superman was getting kicked around, okay? And Superman obviously is the more powerful. And what's amazing about her, what we learned about her from BVS, was that she was a protector. Because the very first thing she did in BVS was protect Batman. If you do remember, her entrance was because Batman was about to get killed. And she protected him, okay? And we saw how powerful she was. That was basically it in essence for Wonder Woman for BVS. When it came to Wonder Woman the movie, which is a revolutionary movie in and of itself, we really got to know what Wonder Woman represented and what was her background. And I believe this really fluently flushed it out. And I'm not going to go into much details, but just suffice to say, Wonder Woman believes in leadership by example. And she believes that each one of us can be a vessel for change. It is up to us, and we must choose our destiny. We must choose whether we want to go to the path of light or the path of darkness. And basically, Wonder Woman is a very empowering film for anyone, because what we learn is how she was taught and her background. We learn that she is a protector by nature, yes, but also that she imbues the attributes of hopefulness, of love, and more importantly, of leading by example. So she will lead by example and get whatever needs to be done. So that's, in essence, what we learned about Wonder Woman. And that's what we see in Justice League. But we see more. In Wonder Woman the movie, we saw her out of the shadows. She was live. She was everywhere. The village people knew about her, and she stood proudly before people, because even though she doesn't care about the glory and all of that, she's more of a deliverer. She was more like a messianic figure than she is of someone to inspire other people per se. So she would deliver this person, deliver that person. Then she learned she can deliver everyone. So she was more of a messenger and an agent than she was. At the end of the movie, she was more of a messenger and an agent. And she didn't care about fame and fortune and glory. She would stay in the shadows, do what she had to do. In Justice League, on the other hand, while we see her come out of the shadows, she's in the shadows all the time. She takes down the criminals. She takes down whoever she has to take down and does what needs to be done. In Justice League, we see her character is challenged. It's challenged to lead out from the front, to place herself before mankind and be a beacon as well, like Superman was, to inspire them, to keep them hopeful. And she's a protector by nature. We learned that. And she was content with staying in the shadows, but still helping out. And so, in Justice League, we saw her come out of the shadows and step into the forefront, along with Superman and along with Batman. Now, Batman he's never really stayed outside of the shadows. He's never really stepped out into the light like Superman and Wonder Woman. He's never really done that. He's known. It's not like he's not known. So he is, to some degree, in the light, in the sense that he's a legend. He's an urban legend for Gotham. So Commissioner Gordon knows him. But as to say he's always been in the light, no. Batman is a guy who stays in the dark. In fact, you hear Batman invite Wonder Woman and say, you can even put on a bat suit and dress like a bat. It's okay by me. You can go back into the shadows, So Batman's more of a shadowy figure. And you can see it in his outfit and everything. He's dressed for the night. He's not really dressed for the day. So it's not surprising that Batman, who is a shadowy character, he stays more to the shadows. Okay? That's just what he does. Works in the night. He doesn't work in the day. So it's interesting to see that when you look at the arc of these three characters, you see now more like Superman. You see the confidence, the everything. Wonder Woman, on the other hand, she is like Wonder Woman now. She steps out of the dark. She's in the light. She speaks to people in London and stuff like that. She apprehends criminals. She has no problem standing before mankind anymore. Batman, he's known in Gotham. Pretty much he is in the shadows still. But the thing about it that's interesting to me is that Batman at this point in time, is much more hopeful. We have not seen a really hopeful Batman. Now we have a hopeful Batman that was able to execute, defend the world, right or wrong with Superman, that he thought, clear his guilt, clear his slate. And the other thing is, he's also always keeping a contingency plan now. He's preparing to have a League of Heroes together so that they could always defend the world from any threat, any particular threat that comes their way. They can defend the world against. So I thought that was really fantastic to watch, as they all stood on top of a house. I thought they were in the nuclear silo, but they're actually on a house looking back at the nuclear silo plant. Because I think the background that we see with all those plants and stuff, I think that's more Wiccan, and I therefore think Whedon had something to do with that. That's just interesting. Now, besides those things carrying through, those three principal characters, which had three separate films to develop them, we also had some ancillary characters that would carry through in all three movies. Well, let me say, in three movies. Let's put it that way. And they have to do with Superman. It's Martha Kent and Lois Lane. They carried through into the trilogy. So anywhere where Superman was, these women were in those movies. It's interesting that's with Suicide Squad. It's also an event that happened after Superman's death, but it's much more immediate than, say, what happened with Justice League. So Justice League was, Bruce Wayne was trying to recruit members of the Justice League at the same time. Obviously, we saw that at the end, in the end credit scenes with Amanda Waller. But also, we see that the Justice League actually assembles after that, right? Now, I want to just mention one more character in the form of a question. There's a character that was actually in three movies as well, who is a member of the Justice League. He appeared as a cameo in one of them, and he was introduced in BVS, and he appeared in Justice League. So there is another character that was in all three movies. I don't know if you know who that is. It'll be interesting. And also there was a picture of one that appeared in three of the movies as well. So there was one character who he appeared as a picture in one of the three movies, and not necessarily the trilogy that we're talking about, and he also was as a cameo in BVS, and then he appeared in Justice League. So that's just an interesting side note for you to think about. Now, besides characters, there were also some repeated shall I say, items or artifacts that appeared in all three movies. Again, showing consistency. Again, I'm being very superficial here, because when I go into more depth, I'll deal with that in time. So the first one was the mother boxes. We saw the mother boxes a number of times in Justice League, in various expressions and iterations of them. And here in Justice League on the plane, Bruce Wayne is talking to Alfred about these mother boxes. You can see them here, and these are all Lex Luthor's notes. And you see, Alfred also has a soft copy of this, and the different places in the world where these mother boxes could be. And I just find it very interesting that this sort of mirrors what we saw at the end of Wonder Woman in the deleted scene where Etta Candy is talking to these Steve Trevor's men and looking to recruit a mother box. And it's interesting, that mother box resembles the mother box of mankind, which they buried, which is this artifact right here, which I hope you guys enjoy watching here. And so I'm just saying that it's highly interesting that we had a continuity with the mother boxes as well. So we had a little mention of the mother boxes in Wonder Woman, not the movie itself, but the epilogue. And we also had mention, of course, in Justice League, where we saw the mother boxes, and they were at multiple places, right? We saw it with Bruce Wayne talking about them. Then we realized the Atlanteans knew about it, and Aquaman knew about it. Well, obviously they did. And then we see in BVS, when we go back to BVS, we see Steppenwolf holding the three mother boxes there, and it was a deleted scene for the theatrical cut, and it was actually in the Ultimate cut. So that was fantastic. And then we hear the story of the mother boxes in Justice League once again. So we had Wonder Woman, we had BVS, and we also had Justice League, which was discussing the mother box. Of course, Justice League would have discussed the mother boxes in much more detail, and they definitely did. And we saw them separated by Superman and Cyborg. So I thought that continuity of the story of the mother box since BVS was interesting, as it, again, the mentioning of the mother boxes in 2 of the trilogy came at the end of them. So we had the epilogue with Etta Candy at the end of Wonder Woman. We had the end of Batman v Superman. We see Lex Luthor finding out about the mother boxes. Then the other very interesting thing is the Kryptonian ship, and that has stayed rather consistent throughout this trilogy. And I find this a very interesting thing. So here we see inside the Kryptonian ship, we see Jor-El, and you see the structure of the Kryptonian ship here as he speaks to General Zod. And the amniotic chamber, if you do remember, even on Krypton, the amniotic chamber had these amniotic pods, and it literally was in a liquid solution, and it was behind a sort of glass slab. Okay? And so here we see General Zod. He has the command key. There are different places where you can put your command key in the ship and conduct business. This is here. He's in front of the amniotic chamber. You have the command key here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And Superman comes and he destroys, with his laser vision, his heat vision, he destroys the ship. And you can see here General Zod looking back because he knows the amniotic chamber is somewhere around there, and basically knocks down General Zod's command chair and his command for the vessel. This is when they were being attacked, when General Zod was about to shoot down the Air Force jet, that the bomber jet that was about to deliver the Kryptonian ship. All right, and it's just very interesting that the marks from that event go all the way back to BVS. So in BVS here, you see Lex Luthor, he opens up a door here using General Zod's prints, and he goes through the Kryptonian ship. You remember this pod-like looking thing. There's a number of different places where that is there, but I just wanted to show you it again. So there you go. These circular sort of passageways, and there you see it there. And he steps down into that Kryptonian chamber, and there was a chair somewhere here. This was ripped, and the pods inside the Kryptonian place, apparently, I'm not too sure how this got ripped this way or burnt this way, but it definitely broke the Kryptonian amniotic chamber here, and everything burst and just basically came tumbling down. But this is where they would house the potential Kryptonian pods, the amniotic pods, in which you could put young Kryptonians and infused with the codex. As Kryptonians could be whatever you wanted them to be, or they could have the potential to be whatever they wanted to be. All right. And so you have these floating things again in here. You see him enter the Kryptonian chamber. Here, this is where he was moving in General Zod's body into that Kryptonian chamber. Of course, the Kryptonian chamber now is filled with fluid. Okay. And what's interesting about this is you're almost going to see an identical shot to this. In the Kryptonian chamber, you see Lex Luthor. He submerges General Zod's body, and here you see the Kryptonian sort of tendrils that come down, and they will cradle General Zod, and then they will attach to him, and it will form a pod with him. Okay, they'll form a pod, and you see the pod here, and they basically start to mutate him into whatever Lex Luthor was trying to get. Of course, Lex Luthor used his DNA, his blood, to merge with General Zod to provide the cellular information he wanted to mutate, genetically bind and mutate General Zod. And then they had a huge jolt of electricity to form a conductive field that was jolted in, that shut down the whole of Metropolis. and that was able to birth. You see the amniotic chamber there, the amniotic sac was able to birth. You see there's a huge amniotic pod here, and that's what the Kryptonian babies were in. If you know the beginning of watching at them on Krypton, you know the baby was inside the pod, and you pick off the pod. So here's the pod right there, and this is just a huger, bigger version of it. And they inject a lot of energy into it in a conductive field to bring the living thing to life here. And you see some of the Kryptonian creatures there that would provide the nutrients and stuff. All right. So what's very interesting about that is the Kryptonian ship stays consistent, and also not just the ship, but just the process in which Superman was brought back to life is pretty much consistent to that. So when we look at the Kryptonian ship, the same Kryptonian ship, this is now in Justice League, and if you do remember the appearance of the Kryptonian ship in BVS, there you go. So you see it from a different angle now. Isn't that cool? So this was in BVS, and then we remember Man of Steel. We go back in Man of Steel, there you go. Very consistent look. So I really appreciate it. So you have that, and then you have this. And then in Justice League, they walk down the chamber, and there's again the place where it was burned through. Superman burned through there to basically destroy the amniotic chamber, and everything kind of fell down and spilled all over the place. And you had the Kryptonian fluid there. And if you just take a look here, there it is, the Kryptonian fluid down below, the tendrils and stuff. We have a slightly different color tone, but other than that, I think more or less the same thing, right? So if you look at, say, for instance, this here, sorry, my bad, this here, right? Slightly different color tone here. I'm sorry, my bad. Here than here. Okay. Slightly different. It's really awesome. And then you saw him carry Zod's body in there, and here we see Kal-El's body being submerged. Zod's body was submerged as well by Lex Luthor before he added his blood to it. Here Kal-El's body is being submerged as well. You go to the end of the Kryptonian ship with the pod-like sort of flooring, and the Flash runs through there. And as he runs through there, you can see him delivering the jolt of electricity. Remember, there was a big jolt of electricity for Doomsday to be birthed, right? Doomsday was birthed by a huge burst of electricity. So you need a conductive field as well. In this case, we're not using amniotic pods to mutate, and we're not using blood to infuse some DNA coding for the genetic manipulation. Instead, what we're using here, the Flash is using a jolt of electricity, and we're using the mother box just to revive Superman. So Superman is going to be revived in this case. So it's very much a similar situation that happened with Lex Luthor bringing about Doomsday, except you're not mutating anything this time. You're just simply restoring. Okay? And so I found that also very interesting to note and just to bring to your attention, guys, because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, with this was not Zack Snyder, this was Joss Whedon, and they need to use a codex." And I'm like, Superman is the codex. What are you talking about? What do you mean they need the codex? The codex is in Superman's cells. It's infused in him. So how are you going to get a codex? Superman, is the codex. Like, didn't you see that in the beginning of the movie? So it's like, talking about these things to people, sometimes they just don't get it, So, yeah. So, the Flash jumps in. He awakes the mother box. The mother box touches the fluid, which has nutritive mediums, and that wakes up Superman, and he goes sky high. And again, it was a tremendous explosion that happened. And the same thing with Doomsday, and there's a tremendous explosion here, and all the water kind of flies out some of the water flies out of the thing, and Superman goes sky high. It was really cool. So I like the consistency as well with these Kryptonian ship that's been through all of the trilogy, with the mother boxes, which has been through part of the trilogy, but has also been seen in Wonder Woman. I love the threes. Everything's in threes, you know. It's just very interesting. Zack Snyder does some very interesting things. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I've only superficially touched the surface. As usual, this video is exceptionally long. So if you do get to the end of it, great. I'm not going to do it over. But I just wanted to share this with you guys because I think that a lot of times people don't really appreciate the journey of these heroes and the journey of these characters, and the journey of that Zack Snyder was telling to get to the heroes that we have today. If you do watch this trilogy back to back, I mean solely for the reason of just having a trilogy, that's, you know, that's big right there, because this movie has a lot to offer. And I'll try to go into the other two characters that I have not covered in much detail. Superman is just ridiculous. I can't cover Superman in detail. It's just too much to cover. But I think I can cover Wonder Woman especially. I'll try to do it in a 4 to 5 minute video, where you can visually see things. You guys will not be able to see it on YouTube. You'll have to go to Facebook, Justice League Unite. You don't have to join the group. You can just look at the contents of the group if you want. But quite frankly, I do want to do a video presentation of that, because talking about these things and even showing you a couple pictures, it doesn't do it justice. And I just had to say that. So I'm looking forward to actually just getting you guys to really get into how deep this thing goes. It goes pretty deep, I think. So hopefully we can get that done, and then once we really establish the characters, I can deal with some other interesting things I want to talk about concerning the Justice League movie and practical aspects for daily life. I really committed a lot of time and effort into these things, so hopefully it bears some fruit, because it really takes a lot of time to do these videos. A lot of time. It takes hours and hours and hours to do this video. So hopefully you guys appreciate that. On that note, you guys have a great one. Oh, one more thing before I go. You notice that, you know, Zack Snyder did a flip. With the death of Superman, a lot of people criticized it because there was no Justice League there to mourn him along with the world. But Zack flipped it. He did the opposite. He had Superman die, and the world mourned him, yes, but there was no Justice League. The resurrection of Superman, on the other hand, had the entire league there present to see him rise from the dead. I loved that. I love that his emphasis was not on death and loss, but on life and gain. I just thought that was a nice flip of the script. You guys have a good one.